difference in sales is what's the outcome? What are you trying to achieve, right? Sales, a large part of a sales job is figuring out who can I qualify out so that I can go on to the people that really matter, right? And where I have the possibility of closing a deal. This is most of the core of this kind of a program is building relationships, and that's a very important thing in sales, is to build relationships. A lot of companies don't do that anymore, even in sales, because it's all inside, and you've got a lead engine. And I think the reason why these kinds of programs are becoming popular is because that function and that knowledge has drained out of a lot of companies. So in some ways, it's putting something back in a structured way that the organization is actually optimized out. Okay, so that's one answer. But a second answer is the goal here is not directly revenue, right? So you can direct a sales type of a process against product reviews, which is somebody else's goal. Somebody else's goal on how many product reviews do we have, against blog content, against referrals, against references, against things that are outside of what a salesperson is responsible for. So I think a lot of the techniques are valid sales techniques. It's just.
But wouldn't you think?
I guess that's up to you and the level of complexity that you want to put into it. I think when you focus on a specific outcome at first, you're going to just tailor, what you do to that outcome. So, so in the engagement phase, it's pretty broad. You're just asking people to engage with you in pretty light-hearted ways. But then at some point, you're asking them to take a step. You want to know, hey, how many of you will be a reference for us if we ever need a reference? And then a bunch of people say, oh yeah, I'll do it. A company called Acton, which is an email marketing company, they had 14 references, 14 referenceable customers, right? 14 people who have said, yeah, I'll be a reference for you. They started a program like this, and it was all just like, hey, we're going to send you a blog post, we're going to reach out, we're going to build a relationship, we're going to do health checks. 3 months later, they asked all those people, hey, we've been talking, right? And so we're looking to add some references, or some people who we can call in case we ever need a reference. And that number went from 14 to 139. And like that, great metric, and they actually have metrics about, okay, well, then they said to those people, can you start referring a customer? Do you have a friend? And they're tracking the revenue, right? And so it's adding, I don't remember what the number was, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars into the pipeline. I think, in one quarter, the first quarter they did it, they closed 60 or 70K. But the point is that the engagement is kind of broad, right? You're not driving them to a specific endpoint until you get to that point. So, yeah. So the question was, a relationship like this might take a couple of years to build, and it's limited, and then people move around, and what do you do? So the first answer is, well, it doesn't have to take a couple of years, right? It can happen pretty quick. I mean, the example I just gave was within 3 months they got advocates. I think I made the point earlier that you can divide the idea of advocacy. It's not just a product that I've had a good experience with, but it's also an idea or a concept. And so in the early stages of a product, that's what you want advocacy for. You want people who share your vision, who share your idea, who share a pain point, who share a recognition that there's a hole in the market, right? And that's what you want to build your relationship around. Not, hey, I'm reaching out to you because I want you to try my product. It's I'm reaching out to you because we're all trying to figure out a solution to this problem. Are you on board with that?
Multiple companies might offer the same solution to the same pain point. Why you, right? Would be a big question. And that again depends on your relationship building, right?
Right. So, so multiple companies will select you or whatever, and then that ties into how well you did building those relationships. But that's why you want those relationships in the first place, right? You want to look for ways to make those relationships easy to create, to find something that has broad appeal. I mean, my own experience when I first started talking about advocacy, a lot of people are interested. It's like, I used to talk a lot about market testing and startups and stuff like that, and I get head nods, but I get people like to advocate for this idea of advocacy right now. It's like an interesting idea, people are wrestling with it, and I can build quick relationships over that. And that has to affect how I approach building my company, building my service, building my product, right? I don't want to be fighting a fight that nobody else is kind of going to advocate for, because it's going to be very hard for me to build a customer base and find other people and share those ideas. But if I can find that vein that people respond to, and it's just an idea, it's just a concept, right? Then I've got relationships and I can start extracting value out of those relationships. And the same thing is true with the product. Starting a new product, what's that pain point? Don't list the 20 pain points that your problem will solve. Find the one that people can kind of rally around and focus on that for a little while and build your advocate base just around that one thing. And you'll probably find your product needs to be a lot smaller than you thought it did. Yeah. Ambassador is a term that is a lot more B2C.
Okay.
I think they share a lot of qualities, right? But a brand ambassador is somebody who's going to go out and talk about you. I think the big difference, one big difference is B2B versus B2C. So you don't really hear people talking, this is just the conversations I've had, but you don't really hear people talking about ambassadors for a brand, because what you're getting out of these people is a lot more than just promoting a brand, right? These are more complex business problems and solutions. So it's not about an ambassador, it's not about somebody who's acting purely as a spokesperson. It's about somebody who's partnering with you and cares so much about that shared vision and that partnership that they will tell other people about it and find other people and talk to other people and pull them into that. I think that's the biggest difference. Really, it's a really good question, right? As a product manager, your people you need as advocates may change over time. And what do you do about that? And so repeating for the camera, right? The question was, what happens when you kind of outgrow the advocate base that you've built? So I've seen companies do different things, right? I've seen them, if this becomes a real meaningful program and they find value in it, then they find ways of redirecting those advocates. So I mean, when you've got 20 people say, hey man, I just love this company and I love what you're doing, somebody in the company is going to want to find a way to put those people to work, right? Just to be really basic about it. So, so you transfer that advocacy, you transfer that relationship, right? You have a personal story here. You say, hey guys, I'm moving on to this other thing, but this conversation that we're talking about, there's some people in my customer support team who are living this all day. So I'm going to introduce you, and let me introduce you, and they start, having a conversation. And that's not an easy thing necessarily to transition if the customer support team isn't bought in. But hopefully, if there's a bunch of people there who say, yeah, I'm really engaged and want to help, there's momentum to do that. And then I've seen companies who have done that a couple times or in a couple different ways, or maybe just had the foresight from the beginning. Actually, like Rapid7, they have a guy his job is to manage that on behalf of the product managers. So he's managing the customer base, and then different customers, it's not about a product all the time, but it's just about the relationship with different people in the company and different pain points at different times. So he pulls in different people from actually not just product management, but all across the organization. So now those advocates feel like, oh, wow, this, my contact here is giving me access to all these people. And, sometimes I'm going to have a tight relationship with them and other times with somebody else. Because they do the same thing, right? They have relationships that ebb and flow in just the same way. So that's kind of fun. Something like this can kick in. And it can kick in at any stage. And it kind of, as a product manager, as a product owner, it depends, what do you want out of it, right? But I've done it for products that didn't exist yet. Hey, before we build anything, let's see if anybody is excited enough about this idea to share it with somebody else. So a lot of the lean startup work that I do is around, let's get advocacy for an idea and just see if there's a market here that we can pursue. We've done it for recruiting beta customers. I had that experience at Bit9. I had that experience at Autover. I've done it many times in my own companies for products that were in beta, and we have clients who we do it for where the product's in beta. I think it's most successful from a business metrics standpoint with products that exist. And the only reason is because there's so many more tangible points of use, right? There's so many more things that you can get out of that program. when there's a big ecosystem and a lot of customers around that product. It's harder to give away a product than it is to sell it. One of the things that an advocate gives you over an adopter is they're kind of plugged into the idea that, hey, I want to move on from this, so I want to buy it at some point. And you kind of get past that a little sooner, right? My own thoughts is the product is hard to give away if you don't really understand what it is that your customers are trying to achieve in the first place. And not directed at you directly, but I just see lots of companies where they create a product, and I did this at the company I was at. Our company built a product without talking to customers. We couldn't give it away. And that didn't have anything to do with advocacy. It was really, we just didn't have a shared quest to go on with any customer. We couldn't find customers that wanted to do that with us. So we ended up building something that wasn't really useful. But I've also seen, I'm talking about the Lean Startup Challenge, companies who pivoted in 2 weeks, found a new product vision, and started getting customers for a product that hadn't even built yet. And that's when you're dealing with different kinds of companies, there are all sorts of different stories. But yeah, that's a great idea. So the question was, it's traditional not to charge somebody for beta, but actually if you charge them, it might help separate the advocates from the non-advocates. Absolutely, right? The tire kickers are the worst kind of beta customers you can get because they're never going to be happy. They're just there to kick tires. You spend all this energy with them. You help them fix problems. You create features for them, and you go to sell it, and nobody will buy it because they never had to worry about a buying process, right? I talk to entrepreneurs. I talk to people building products. There's a tendency to want to be a perfectionist when you're releasing your first product. And it's one of the worst tendencies you can have. It's one of the worst things you can do. I say, put some bugs in your product. Like, release it before it's done. And here's the reason why. Because if somebody will use it despite the bugs, they're getting real value out of it. If somebody will pay for it, even though it's got a bug, they get real value out of it. I would much rather have somebody using a buggy product and saying, hey, you have to fix this because my job depends on it, than 10 people using a product that's perfect, but I get no feedback and I get no pressure to change and to evolve and to do something better. That person who needs that product will tell me more about what they need and why they need it and why it's so important that that bug gets fixed. And I think charging for a product is exactly the same. Ask somebody to invest in this. We're on a quest together, right? I'm putting my blood, sweat, and tears into this product. If this is so important to you, what are you willing to give up? And I think that's a totally valid thing to do. Yeah. My opinion on Kickstarter for starting a software product is, I don't think it's the right fit.
They don't think B2B.
Sorry?
They don't do B2B, I tried.
They don't do B2B?
Yeah.
Even for like consumer software, whatever, I think it's too hard to describe and be accurate about what your software is going to do. So yeah, you might get some people excited, but it takes more money to build good software than I think Kickstarter can legitimately deal with. And I think you're going to get people who are not happy with what's been produced because it's hard to build software. So, but yeah, I'm not that familiar with people who have been successful with Kickstarter and building a software product or a B2B product or anything like that. I don't think crowdsourcing really applies. Possibly, right? But I've run advocacy programs where they're not customers yet. I've run advocacy programs for the purposes of sales, right? All right, so I do think largely, yes, largely that's true. Right? Largely, if somebody's not a customer, how can they really be an advocate? But I think there is an exception where there are influencers out there who don't necessarily buy, but they do advocate and they do find good ideas and help connect you with prospects and new buyers and potential customers. And those people have legitimate opinions. They're putting their reputation on the line by advocating. Right? And so they are going through a qualification process. They are invested in doing that advocacy. And I think those people are valuable. And you might not, they're not necessarily people that blog or have a name. They could be just somebody who's very well connected on LinkedIn and has access to a bunch of people. So occasionally you can find people who will act in that way, and they can become advocates, and they're invested in the same way that a customer would be invested, because there's something in it for them. People are going to respond positively to receiving that advocacy, and